Hey, good morning.
Morning, Dave.
How are you doing this morning, Brett?
Just shy of fantastic. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. I'm in rainy Austin, Texas this morning.
Can't beat that. Probably not much snow down there.
No, it's not very cold. I mean, they think it's cold. You know, it's 50 degrees or something like that yesterday, but that's not very cold. So,
Not for Texas's standards.
nah. Are you taking off for the week, or are you working this week until Christmas?
We'll kind of see how things go. I'm going to try to take off if I can, but we got 2 projects that are active that kind of need a little babysitting. We just got a bunch of snow this past couple of weeks in some of the areas, and so we had 4 days of delays just in snow alone. So yeah, it'll be kind of a moving target for a while, I think.
All right. Do you want to? It's 7 o'clock, Brett. Do you want to wait a couple minutes just because sometimes people trickle in a little bit late? I don't know how heavy the phone call will be today, just because it's right before Christmas, but it'll be available online for folks to watch. So.
Yep, that's perfectly fine.
Okay. Natalie, where are you out of?
I'm out of Nashville, Tennessee. I work for the Tennessee Department of Transportation in our mitigation office.
Oh, okay. Very good. Very good.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed these webinars. I learned about it at the stream restoration conference that was here in Nashville in August. And it's been really cool to see what people are doing across the nation.
Well, good. Well, we can thank Paula for putting it out there more. Thank you, Paula.
Yeah.
Here we go. We have some people coming in, Brett. So let's wait until about 2 minutes after and see how that goes.
Sounds good.
Could have hold music or sing a Christmas carol while we wait, but I don't think anybody wants to hear me sing, so we'll just wait. All right. Well, Brett, I'll introduce you. Brett Roburg has been working with Nebraska Game and Parks for a number of years. He specializes in habitat improvements and is doing work related to stream restoration, water conservation in Nebraska. So with that said, Brett, I'll let you take over, man.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. And I guess before I get started, I kind of want to acknowledge a couple of people that are really important to kind of make a lot of this stuff happen. The first being Dave Bottlesbach. He's been really helpful for this project by itself, but a couple other folks to talk about is Mike Geenan, Ron Koth, Tom McDonald, and of course, Paula. She's been really good about disseminating some of this information through River Shared. So without them, I don't think a lot of this would be possible. So as Dave mentioned, we're kind of talk about a project that we've worked on through River Shared the past couple of years and kind of shifting into this title that I put together called Shifting the Conservation of Paradigm for Streams and Rivers Across the Great Plains. See if this works. There we go. So the things I want to talk about today are kind of starting with the cool water streams, and it's applicability or utility or relevancy in the state of Nebraska. The next thing we'll talk about is a specific cool water stream that we worked with River Shared called Dry Spotted Tail Creek. And then being a fisheries biologist, we kind of talk about some of the fish surveys that we've seen as a product of this project. And then kind of zooming back out and to kind of explain maybe some implications for what this project means for other prairie streams across the Great Plains or even across the nation. And so, as I mentioned, cool water streams are really important to the state of Nebraska for a variety of reasons. These streams typically are some of the highest water quality that we have in the state. And for those that are colorblind, my apologies, but it's mainly these blue and green streams that are found in the western part of the state. And these streams are not only important from the water quality standpoint, but they provide a lot of habitat for some really important fish that we manage as well. Those fish are trout, but also there are some of the native sensitive species as well, some of the threatened and endangered ones as well. And Nebraska is 97% privately owned. And so through this management plan that we put together starting in 2016, we kind of wanted to do two things. First is we wanted to conserve as many stream miles as we could, but then also take advantage of any opportunities that we could to improve these streams along the way. Now, in total, these streams account for less than 25% of all stream miles that we have in the state. And so again, we kind of want to take advantage of any opportunities that would come to us along the way. So shortly after this management plan was implemented, we were approached by two entities, Trout Unlimited and Ducks Unlimited, about a project that they've been working on for a couple years prior. And they approached us to kind of see whether or not we would help them kind of push this project along the finish line. Now, this stream is unique for a variety of reasons. One is that in western Nebraska, the land use is predominantly corn, sugar beets, and sometimes alfalfa. And sometimes, or early in the 1900s, the stream was channelized to improve the water conveyance to the North Platte River and then ultimately in Lake McConaughey. So shown here is you can see the existing stream pretty straight. And then this is the North Platte River looking south. And the water appropriations in this stream largely are focused on Lake McConaughey, which is kind of our banking account, if you will, for irrigation needs for areas downstream. And again, not only is this stream unique, but if you look at the hydrograph, most of our higher water occurs later in the year during kind of the midsummer to early fall periods. And again, this is largely predicated because of the land use and irrigation needs along the way. So one way that they use this water is through flood irrigation. So they'll actually take the water out of these canals, run it through a pipe, and then flood irrigate the corn rows. And at the end of it, they'll collect that water and then return it back to the stream and ultimately back in the North Platte River. Another way is taking that groundwater, putting it through a sprinkler system, what we commonly refer to as a center pivot irrigation, and kind of go through that same process. And a lot of this is driven from two primary canals that are fed in western Nebraska. The first being the Enterprise Canal, shown here on the top, and the bottom one is the Tri-State Canal. Now, these canals initially originate in Wyoming, and the water is released through a series of diversion canals and reservoirs and things like that. But our project site lies right down here, and the headwaters are up here. And so both of these canals inundate across this watershed two different times. And when we first started this, we kind of want to look at what is the efficiency of these canals. And through Andrea and Greg Talek and Dave Beitelsbach and many others, they did some modeling to kind of figure out that this area is actually about 61% efficient. And so before we got too far along, one of the things that we wanted to look at is what happens if they were to improve the efficiency of this delivery operation. And so shown here in this heat map is just areas where this canal has the highest propensity to leak into the groundwater. And so these might be the kind of the primary targets to improve that efficiency. And so if they were to improve the efficiency of some of these areas to about 95%, that could mean that our project site down here could go from about 14 CFS down to about 5 or 6 CFS. Now, although that was kind of outside of our project scope, certainly something to be aware of as we kind of proceeded forward. Luckily for us, there wasn't any of that coming forward, so we felt comfortable that we could proceed, but still something that we wanted to be cognizant of. So after kind of getting some background of this project, we kind of all put our minds together in a meeting room in Scotts Bluff, and we actually partnered with Dave Bottlesbach, Ron Koth, Peter, Jim Broderick, and many others to kind of help provide some concrete mechanisms to kind of push this project forward. And so credit to many of the partnerships kind of shown here on the screen. But one of the first things that we did is we highlighted kind of 4 primary targets. The first being restoring dimension pattern and profile. The second, restoring floodplain connectivity, restoring the fishery and wetland habitats, and of course, providing some angler access along the way. And so from there, we kind of expanded that even further. Dave has talked about the MCDA matrix before, and this is something that we actually utilize, and I think it worked really, really well for us, given the vast amount of partnerships and interests by many of the different stakeholders. And I won't go into this in great detail. There's been some videos and further discussions on this, but just to kind of break it down into some simplistic terms, we kind of separated ourselves in fisheries and wildlife and partner and land management tables. And each one of us kind of came up with a series of objectives that we wanted for our own entity. And so you can kind of see shown here on the top is we had fisheries goals, water rights goals, risk goals, funding, land management, water quality, wildlife goals. And then we weighted that against all the potential options that we had available to us on this particular project site. And after we got done with that, we scored all of these numbers up to kind of figure out which of these alternatives gave us the best bang for our buck, or which of these alternatives most closely aligned with our goals and objectives. And just to describe this visually, here are all the things that we are ultimately weighting against, including the do nothing, all the way to a priority 1 restoration, or even a combination of a different restoration technique, so 1, 3, and a 4. And through this MCDA matrix, we ultimately came to a consensus that this alternative shown here in the screen is the one that was most conducive for everybody. Now, I know there's a lot of engineers in this room, and just to provide some of the engineering jargon that many of you are familiar with, just to provide some kind of snapshot of the hydrology and hydraulics that we found using some stream gauge analysis and the daily mean discharge at the gauge, which we were really fortunate, was literally on the top end of our project site. So that couldn't have been positioned in any better. But you can just kind of see the range of scatter that we've seen since, the early days of the 1900s. And that median value is about 10 CFS. And then going through the reoccurrence interval or the log Pearson type 3 distribution to kind of figure out what that probable bankful discharge is at our project site, which we found to be about 187. And the maximum annual discharge we found to be about 2,000 CFS. Now, once we kind of did some of the stream gauge analysis, Dave and his team did some of the geomorphic surveys at 2 reference reaches further upstream of our project site, shown here in the top of the screen. So our stream gauge was located about here. Here's our project site. And again, here's the 2 reference reaches. Now, these reference reaches were chosen because they weren't influenced by the historical channelization and were within the bounds of the existing watershed. So Dave and his team collected a bunch of field data and ultimately put together some composite design listings here. And just a couple things I wanted to highlight. Our bankful width range between 24 and 26. Bankful areas between 50 and 55. Bank heights were about 1. And in the state of Nebraska, we're not fortunate to have stream stats yet. So Dave had to do some additional digging and some additional modeling just to figure out what is that bankful discharge. And one of the ways that they utilized that was through the runoff watershed coefficient, watershed rainfall coefficient, sorry. And through that analysis, they found that bankful discharge was estimated to be about 90, which seems to kind of jive with the initial stream gauge analysis, giving us a cross-sectional area bankful about 50. So based on that, we were in the ballpark and we felt comfortable that we could proceed. And the other thing I wanted to mention too was the sinuosity. The existing reach of our channel, we found sinuosity to be about 1.0, which is about as straight as you can make it. And then our composite design, we were hoping to get about 1.4. So after all that discussions and iterations, this is ultimately the final design that we wanted to see. And so the orientation of this image is kind of tilted a little bit. So this is actually the north end, east and south. And so going through this design, the first thing we wanted to incorporate was this priority 1 restoration. And over time, the stream is down cut. And so we wanted to kind of step this stream back up and then divert it over here to reconnect that floodplain and add a bunch of habitat complexity for the fish. And through that, we also wanted to install an emergency overflow so that if any high water were to exhibit this area, instead of it running down to the new channel and potentially impacting it, we wanted to design it so they would carry on downstream and have minimal impacts. And through that emergency overflow, we also wanted to incorporate some auxiliary oxbows for some wetland habitat improvements. And then these habitat features up here were mainly designed to kind of provide some additional areas for anglers to fish, some habitat features that might congregate fish that might help them catch a fish along the way. And here is just kind of a design riffle cross section that kind of illustrates the stage and the potential discharge. And you can see that it was initially estimated to be about 100 CFS at bankful. Now, as I mentioned, through this priority 1, we would have the ability to raise that stream channel. I think we estimated to be about 9 feet. And so by doing that, we felt that we might be able to recharge some of the groundwater in this area that previously was a wetland. Now, some of this might be a little bit over exaggerated, but you can kind of see by these blue areas and based on LiDAR that there was a chance that we might be able to daylight some of this previous groundwater. And the areas highlighted in green are maybe the moist soil conditions that we would potentially get seasonally. And then the brown areas are kind of the enhanced uplands. So we were optimistic, but we felt that maybe through this effort, we might be able to achieve that, which would further expand those wetland habitats that some of our wildlife friends were really seeking out. So we broke this project into 2 different phases. The first one being the actual designing of the stream channel. And we did this specifically in the dry. That just seemed to work better for everyone. You'd be able to really hit your elevations and not have to worry about water management or anything like that. And our contractor did a rock star job being able to do this in just a couple of months. So once the new channel was designed, the next thing was to build that emergency overflow. And how we did that is we actually used tow wood along this main meander bend. And on the backside, we used some boulders to kind of reinforce that, just to help minimize any degradation or something that may occur. And like with any project, you typically get hit with high water, shortly after the project is completed. But luckily, Dave and his team designed this appropriately, that this water actually spilled over to this emergency flow or emergency overflow. And you can see that we had very minimal amount of erosion as a consequence of that. And the only reason we had any erosion at all is simply because when this actually took place, we didn't have any vegetation established, but it was nothing of any concern. And it was really neat to see. And here's just an image of what those oxbows look like. And those oxbows are holding perennial water. So really exciting to see about that. Now, being a fisheries biologist, this was kind of my happy place, just kind of looking at some of the fish responses that come along with some of these habitat improvement projects. And as I mentioned, we were kind of approached by Trout Unlimited and Ducks Unlimited early on in this process. And so we didn't have a lot of time to collect a robust amount of information, a lot of pre-data that we would do otherwise. And so right before we had a meeting with all of our partner groups, we kind of set out to figure out what fish really live in this section of stream. We haven't really spent any time at all on this project site. And so normally the way that we do our fish surveys is with tote barge electrofishing, shown here in the right. And we standardize our stations based on 40 times the max stream width. And so our distance could be a minimum of 150 meters or a maximum of 300 meters. And so we started here closer to the Platte River, and we worked our way upstream during low flow conditions, again, just to get a snapshot of what fish are in this system currently so that we can kind of formulate our designs to that. We actually had to extend this from the maximum of 300 meters And we ultimately surveyed nearly this whole section of stream because we didn't find any fish at all, which is just mind blowing. Typically we find fish using this type of equipment. Water quality was good, low flow conditions. We had 4 people surveying, and we literally caught 3 fish across this 3/4 of a mile. And the 3 fish that we caught were all tucked underneath a tumbleweed located on the side of a bank. And my speculation is that might be just because there's not any quality pools, because the sinuosity is 1. There's no geomorphic pools that are, holding these fish per se. That was my initial speculation. And so we went back the following year to see whether or not our surveys was truly an anomaly. And what we found is 23 fish. So a little bit higher than 3, but proportionally of all of our total catch, most of which were common carp, which are non-native fish that we're certainly not trying to manage for. But as time went on, you can kind of see that shift in biodiversity as the project was completed. And so it was completed shortly after September 2019. And so we went from 23 fish to 205 to 275, so on and so forth. But one thing that always kind of caught my attention initially was our most abundant fish was common carp. But as we move across time, you can see that graph steadily starting to decrease. So maybe there's some evidence that we artificially suppressed the total amount of common carp in this region. The other thing that was kind of interesting was that we found a lot more sport fish along the way as well. Brown trout were already existing in the watershed. Channel catfish, sauger, walleye, and yellow perch likely came from the North Platte River through entrainment losses of some of the Wyoming reservoirs further upstream. But equally important, or as interesting, is we caught 3 species that are actually listed as being threatened or endangered on the state level that we never found in this watershed prior. And I think that's something to really kind of hang our hat on, is that, we initially started with an invasive species as being most predominant, but then you look all the way over here, you can see the shift in all the biodiversity that we've been able to collect thus far. And again, this is just raw data, but we're hoping to continue monitoring to see whether this remains status quo or whether we see some increases or decreases in some of these native fishes as well. But by and large, everything seemed to look really, really good. So just kind of provide a snapshot of what we initially started with. You can see on the image to the left, this was the existing stream channel. And then fast forward a couple years later, you can see our priority 1 restoration here, some auxiliary oxbows. But with some really strong partnership groups, Ducks Unlimited actually was able to find some additional funding sources to expand those wetland habitats even further. And you can see these oxbow habitats that they were able to create off channel. And these actually wouldn't have been possible without this priority 1 restoration. And I guess just to expand on that a little bit further, just to get the archaeological clearance, we actually needed to do some test plots along this new stream channel just to see if there were any artifacts in that area. In this area up here, we had to dig down, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 9 to 10 feet before we actually found groundwater. It was a little bit less as you got closer to the North Platte River. But through this diversion of this new channel, you can see that we've actually been able to restore quite a bit of that water just as this new channel is concerned, which I think is really, really neat and something to kind of really keen in on for other projects. Now, kind of looking at the management implications, kind of coinciding with the title, I think streams across the Great Plains and specifically in Nebraska have been channelized for a variety of reasons. And I think that maybe this case study provides some really unique validity in maybe looking at the ecological resilience to help kind of maintain or improve these habitat conditions for fish, wildlife, and things like that. And kind of looking in the context of climate change, some of the forecasts in this area specifically is looking at more intense rainfalls. And so if you have a stream that has been channelized, there's a really high propensity that stream is wanting to migrate laterally. And so maybe we can kind of look at reconnecting these habitats through this particular type of work to kind of improve the ecological resilience to help mitigate against climate change, while doing so all while maintaining those existing water rights. Again, all of this water in Dry Spotted Tail Creek is return flows from irrigation needs. And so we can kind of recycle that water, if you will, to kind of bolster some of these the biodiversity found in this particular region. And of course, when you have a channelized system, you have really high B-highs and near bank stresses at times. And so providing that natural meander, adding some riparian vegetation kind of helps stabilize those banks to clean the water, reduce sediment loading. And what we've kind of seemed to have some indications of is it's benefiting a quite variety of the fish found in this region. And we can do this all while enhancing some of these recreational opportunities. So I appreciate everyone's time. This is a really exciting project. We're hoping to continue monitoring moving forward. Again, some of the data that we shared with you today is just raw data, but hopefully look at maybe putting together a publication and some real concrete statistics to kind of highlight some of the changes that we've seen thus far. So with that, I appreciate everyone's time and gladly take any questions if you have any.
Hey, Brett, it's Brad. Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any pushback from the irrigators about this whole idea at the beginning? Were they skeptical, or how did they feel about it?
Yes, but it wasn't specifically from the landowners. It was the irrigation districts. And the only thing that they kind of reiterated that we cannot like pond the water, if you will. Like that water's got to be free flowing so that they can account it in the North Platte River and further downstream. And so if I remember correctly, we put together a programmatic agreement with them just to make sure that that was satisfactory to their needs, and never heard anything further from that. So I think everyone's pretty pleased about it.
Have you been back to present the results since you've gotten some preliminary results?
We have not, primarily because we're still kind of monitoring just to see if things continue in the direction that we'd like them to, but certainly something we might be able to do, moving forward.
Interesting in terms of you may get more buy-in and maybe, realize that you can have your cake and eat it too on projects like this.
Certainly.
Thank you.
And I guess if we have time, Dave, I was going to share one thing that kind of lessons learned in the Great Plains of